Pero nag-confirm naman. Hindi importante sa kanila yung disaster. Kailangan namin yung, yung sa 4 thematic areas kasi. DOST. Kailangan din namin ng NEDA, DSWD, DILG. Nandiyan pa yung NEDA? Pag-iano na nga. Kasi may matatanong yun. Darating. DSWD, wala. DILG.
Mr. Game.
Sige.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, on the part of the Senate, the Chair calls this public hearing to order.
On the part of the House, this meeting is hereby called to order.
At this juncture, let me acknowledge the presence of our Vice Chairman, Senator Ping Lacson. With the presence of Senator Lacson, the Chair declares the presence of a quorum. Let me state for the record that the Senate members of this Congressional Oversight Committee are Senators Lacson, Senator Soto, Senator Legarda, Senator Escudero, and Senator Trillanes.
On the part of the House, the members of the House are Honorable si Christopher Belmonte of Quezon City, Honorable Villaflor Angara Castillo of Aurora, Honorable Eric Martins of Valenzuela City, Honorable Siriaco Calalang, we have him here, Party List Kabayan, Honorable Alfredo Garbin, Party List Ako Bicol, he is present also.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please allow me to acknowledge the presence of our guests. Let me start with Assistant Secretary Christopher James Purisima, who is representing Secretary Lorenzana of the Department of National Defense.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Administrator Vicente B. Malano, PhD, who is representing Secretary De La Peña of the DOST. Good morning. And of course, Yusek Renato Yu Solidum Jr., OIC of the FIBOX. Good morning, sir. Before we proceed, may the Chair first request that we approve the proposed internal rules of procedure which shall govern all proceedings of this Oversight Committee. We distributed copies of the said rules to all members of both the Senate and House panels. May we hear from the members if there are any amendments or comments? And
No comment.
Mr. Chair?
No comment. Any comments on them?
There being no objections, may we ask a member to move for the adoption of the rules?
I move for the adoption of the rules of the Oversight Committee, Mr. Chairman.
The motion.
Hearing no objection, the internal rules of procedure of this Oversight Committee is hereby adopted. Please allow, Mr. Chairman, us to enter into the record an opening statement. The Philippines is one of the most disaster-prone nations in the world. This can be attributed to its geographic location and its physical characteristics. Located along the Typhoon Belt and the Pacific Ring of Fire, where many earthquakes and volcanic eruptions occur, the country is vulnerable to natural disasters. According to PAGASA, at least 20 cyclones hit the country yearly, of which 10 are typhoons, with 5 having the potential of being destructive. Aside from natural calamities, the Philippines is not spared from man-made disasters caused by armed conflict in parts of the country. Republic Act number 10121, otherwise known as the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, was intended to uphold, and I quote, to uphold the people's constitutional rights to life and property by addressing the root causes of vulnerabilities to disasters, strengthening the country's institutional capacity for disaster risk reduction and management, and building resilience of local communities to disasters, including climate change impacts. RA 10121 has been in effect for almost 8 years now. Considering the number of disasters that struck our country since the effectivity of this law, natural calamities, including Typhoons Yolanda in 2013, Typhoon Pablo in 2012, and Typhoon Pepeng in 2009, the recent Mayon volcano eruption, and man-made disasters such as the Zamboanga and Marawi attacks, it is high time to conduct a sunset review and systematic evaluation of the effects of this act on our lives, our economy, our environment, and our national development. We need to undertake an audit of the short, medium, and long-term performance and organizational structure of the implementing agencies and our country's compliance with international DRRM agreements for purposes of determining remedial legislation. This Oversight Committee also needs to examine whether the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Framework is responsive to the times. Hence, this public hearing on PS Resolution number 10 filed by the Honorable Senator Lacson and PS Resolution number 100 filed by Senator Gaispo, which both focus on the same concerns. However, the proposed resolution filed by Senator Poe seeks the establishment of a separate full-time permanent cabinet-level disaster resilience and emergency management agency, which shall serve as the focal point for integrated disaster resilience, climate change adaptation and mitigation, and emergency management. Before we proceed, let me underscore some of our country's DRRM initiatives and engagements related to this law. The Philippines was a signatory to a 10-year plan of action, the Hyogo Framework for Action, 2005 to 2015. The HFA intended to build the resilience of nations and communities to disasters and reduce vulnerabilities and risks to hazards. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, 2015 to 2030, followed the Hyogo Framework for Action. It is built on elements which ensure continuity of the work done by states, which include the Philippines and other stakeholders under the HFA. The Philippines has actively participated in global initiatives for disaster risk reduction, as well as climate change adaptation, such as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Asian Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management. The regional body created under the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response. But the HFA report also indicated that in general, the Philippines has shown significant progress in attaining risk reduction with the enactment of its DRRM legal framework. Notwithstanding our nation's efforts and initiatives, we continue to face challenges in achieving effective disaster risk reduction and management. Increasing frequency and intensity of disasters continue to impede progress towards sustainable development. Let me state for the record some reports which make us aware of the threat of disasters to our country. The 2016 World Bank Risk Report published by the United Nations University Institute of Environment and Human Security indicated that the Philippines ranked third among the most disaster-prone countries in the world, with a risk index of 26.70%. Vanuatu and Tonga, both located in the southern Pacific Ocean, ranked first with a risk index of 36.28 and second with a risk index of 29.33 respectively. In the 2016 German Watch Global Climate Risk Index, the Philippines ranked fourth among the most affected countries from 1995 to 2014 in the Long-Term Climate Risk Index. The Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters in Belgium recorded 187 significant damaging natural disasters in the Philippines from 2007 to 2016, causing the death of 16,262 people and injury to 44,018 persons. And more than 100 million individuals were affected, and an estimated US 19.16 billion as the cost of damage to the country. These reports provide information on the disaster risk profile of our country. In today's hearing, we seek to address the limitations identified by DRRM organizations and stakeholders that hamper the implementation of this law. Mechanisms and legal framework, planning and implementation, and budgetary support. And these are the questions that come to mind. How compliant and responsive is the current NDRRM framework? Do the line agencies and LGUs have enough resources to perform DRRM functions? Has the NDRRM law been harmonious with the Local Government Code, the Climate Change Act, and other related laws, policies, and issuances. Are local and foreign support, assistance, and funds for DRRM properly and transparently disbursed, monitored, and accounted for? Have our responses to disasters been institutionalized down to the most vulnerable communities? Have we been able to enhance cooperation and coordination among various stakeholders, including civil society, the private sector, the academe, the church, and the international community in the spirit of private-public partnership and convergence? And finally, has there been an effort to study and integrate disaster risk reduction with the peace process? We hope to find clear answers to these issues and other concerns. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today, the Congressional Oversight Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Systems will hold its organizational meeting, and we also have invited guests from different agencies involved in the implementation of Republic Act 10121 or the DRRM law. These are relatively new law and only 7 years old, and since it was signed. But the law resulted in a paradigm shift from mere disaster response to disaster preparedness. The law sought to strengthen the whole government setup down to our barangays as the first respondents in disasters. We would like to be apprised of how far we have gone in realizing the objectives of the law. And of course, we are open to suggestions and proposals to support these objectives that will be able to shape a national consciousness, a culture of disaster resiliency that would be competent on preparedness, mitigation, and post-disaster support for economic recovery. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Camille Ruiz. Ms. Camille Ruiz?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. From DRRNet.
Okay, DRRNet.
Yes, po.
Thank you. Good morning, ma'am. Ms. Pauline de Guzman of the Disaster Risk Reduction Network, Philippines.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Also from DRRNet Philippines. Thank you.
Good morning. Ms. Sandra Paredes, Executive Director, League of Provinces of the Philippines.
Magandang umaga po.
Magandang umaga po. Chairman, with your permission, we'll go to the discussion hearing.
Yes, sir.
Unless, introduction. Chairman, any other statements? May we hear first from the Office of Civil Defense. ASEC, Chris.
Good morning, Senator Anasan, Mr. Chairman, sir. Good morning, Representative Espino, Mr. Chairman, sir. Honorable Vice Chairperson, honorable members of this Congressional Oversight Committee. With your permission, I have a short presentation regarding the sunset review undertaken in relation to Republic Act number 10121. I deliver this presentation, Your Honors, on behalf of the Secretary of National Defense, Delphine Lorenzana, who is also chairperson of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, as well as Civil Defense Administrator under Secretary Ricardo B. Halad, who serves as Executive Director of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. Please allow me to brief you on the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management programs in line with RA 10121. The scope of my presentation is as follows. Bigyan mo na silang hard copy. Ay, bigyan mo.
Sec. Purisima, will you be furnishing the committee hard copies?
Yes, Your Honor. We will provide hard copies.
We have a mechanism for cross-checking.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yung request ni Senator Lacson na lakihan ng konti yung fonte, you have to be gentle with senior citizens.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, you are not old. You still look so young. Share with us your secret.
Next slide, please. The scope of my presentation is as follows. Next slide. The OCD's mandate, as provided for under Republic Act Number 10121, is to administer a comprehensive national civil defense and disaster risk reduction and management program by providing leadership in the continuous development of strategic and systematic approaches, as well as measures to reduce the vulnerabilities and risks to hazards and manage the consequences of disasters. Next slide, please. The OCD's mission is to provide leadership and administration of a national comprehensive civil defense and disaster risk reduction and management program, while its vision is to be a center for excellence in DRRM by 2020. Next slide, please. My apologies for the small framework there. Shown is the OCD organizational structure. The Notice of Organization, Staffing and Compensation Action, or NOSCA, was approved on August 2015, and the third level positions approved by the Office of the President on 22 March 2016.
Secretary Purisima, please allow me to interrupt. No? Yung hard copy, kasing laki nung
Tayo ng malaki.
Hindi.
We will,
Magpahabol ka na lang nung...
we will do, Your Honor.
Please, thank
My
you.
apologies.
Salamat.
The office functions under the leadership of a civil defense administrator with the equivalent rank of undersecretary and concurrent executive director of the NDRRMC. The CDA is being supported by 2 civil defense deputy administrators, 1 for administration and 1 for operations, with the rank of assistant secretary, and assisted by 5 service directors who are ranked director 3. At the operational level, we have 17 regional offices headed by Director 2s, and also serves as the chairperson of the Regional Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Councils in the respective regions, except in the case of NCR and ARMM. Next slide, please. As to the staffing fill-up, OCD has a 64% fill-up on its authorized positions of 644, or a total of 412 personnel, of which 96% fill-up is for the third level positions, 58% fill-up for second level positions, and 75% fill-up for first level positions. This is as of 31 December 2017, Your Honors. Next slide, please. The National Disaster Coordinating Council, or NDCC, established on 11 June 1978 by virtue of Presidential Decree number 1566, was transformed into the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council on 27 May 2010, when RA 10121 was signed into law. Next slide, please. The enactment of RA 10121 brought about the paradigm shift from reactive to proactive posture in terms of disaster risk reduction and management. Before, we used to have a top-down centralized approach to disaster management. Now we are taking a bottoms-up participatory DRRM approach. Before, we focused on disaster response. Now we just don't look at response. Instead, we take an integrated and holistic approach by looking at all aspects of disaster risk reduction with a premium on prevention, mitigation, and preparedness measures. Next slide, please. Shown is the NDRRM framework, which was approved on 6 June 2011. The framework unifies our actions in achieving the vision of safer, adaptive, and resilient Filipino communities towards sustainable development. It shows that, at the start, the 4 thematic areas are given equal treatment. However, as we reduce the risk factors of disasters and mainstream DRR and climate change adaptation in planning and implementation, we note that we would be dealing more in terms of prevention and mitigation activities as well as preparedness activities as opposed to response and rehabilitation and recovery. Next slide, please. Consequently, the NDRRMC approved the NDRRM plan on 7 February 2012. The plan contains 4 priority areas, 14 objectives, 26 outcomes, 56 outputs, and 93 activities. For each activity, the plan specifies the lead agency, their partners, the roles and responsibilities, as well as the timelines for accomplishments. Next slide, please. The vision of the NDRRMC is to achieve safer, adaptive, and disaster-resilient Filipino communities towards sustainable development through the 4 thematic areas, namely disaster prevention and mitigation, disaster preparedness, disaster response, and disaster rehabilitation and recovery. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Sunset Review. As a background, the Sunset Review includes the landmark legislation for Philippine DRRM. The Sunset Review initiated a shift the new law initiated a shift to a proactive DRRM posture. The new law likewise gives priority on DRR prevention and mitigation over response. Typhoon Riming, Ondoy, and Pepeng compelled the passage of RA 10121. Also, the establishment of permanent disaster management offices at all LGU levels was also mandated under RA 10121. RA 10121 likewise transformed and expanded NDCC from 19 members into the NDRRMC that has at least 44 members. And the RA 10121 made OCD the lead agency in administering a comprehensive national defense and DRRM policy for the Philippines. Next slide, please. Section 27 of RA 10121 mandates the Congressional Oversight Committee for the implementation of RA 10121 to conduct a sunset review of the law within 5 years from its effectivity. The law came into effect in 2010 and was scheduled for review in 2015. Hence, beginning 2014, the NDRRMC through the OCD conducted a series of consultations to identify the salient issues and challenges to RA 10121's implementation and to submit proposals for the amendment or revision of the law based on these consultations. UNDP Philippines provided support for the conduct of the Sunset Review consultations and technical analysis of the inputs provided by the participants through the DRR CCA Policies Standardization Project at the OCD's Project Management Office. Next slide, please. This diagram illustrates the process of the Sunset Review consultations and the approval process for the ensuing bill. Right now, we are at the executive level, particularly at the level of the NDRRMC Full Council. Next slide, please. As to the timeline of activities, you can see that in 2014 we had benchmarking sessions as well as policy and institutional assessments. In 2015, we had the presentations of by the TNG of the Sunset Review results, thematic area consultations, LGU consultations, a policy write-shop regarding the Sunset Review, as well as additional meetings of the technical working group for the proposed remedial legislative measure. In 2016, we had the initial draft presented to the new set of NDRRMC members, gathering of comments from member agencies, TWG discussions on these comments, another meeting of the technical management group, as well as other technical management group level meetings. In 2017, we had several technical working group and technical management group meetings, as well as a presentation to the Cabinet Assistance System last March 2017, as well as meetings with the congressional leadership. Next slide, please. The following slides highlight some of the identified issues and challenges in DRRM implementation based on the Sunset Review consultations. The second column of the table shows some of the amendments in the draft amendatory bill that were written in order to address these challenges. The expected outcomes from the legal amendments are at the third column. The issues and proposed legal amendments with respect to the disaster risk governance framework are as follows. First, in terms of structure and level of authority. Second, on roles and responsibilities of stakeholders. And third, on insufficient DRRM finance at the local level. And fourth, unclear agency accountability for reporting the receipt and utilization of DRRM funds. And this can be seen from the table shown. Next slide, please. The next slide lists some of the important issues and proposed legal amendments as regards disaster risk assessment, monitoring, and evaluation. In particular, the two identified issues are the lack of coherent and consistent policy on disaster risk assessment, as well as early warning communication in terms of and the non-standardization of early warning communications. The proposed amendments are also seen in the table as shown. Lastly, in terms of, next slide please. Lastly, in terms of disaster risk management, covering preparedness, response, recovery, and rehabilitation, shown are the issues identified, such as lack of acceptable evacuation centers, inefficient coordination of international humanitarian assistance, slow coordination of national, local government response, and fourth, lack of consistent recovery and rehabilitation standards. The proposed remedial measures are shown in the second column of the table. Next slide, please. As one output of the Sunset Review consultations, there is a proposal to expand the membership of the NDRMC from the current 44 to 56 members. And the additional members are shown, the proposed additional members are shown in the next slide. Next slide, yeah, there. The Secretary of the Department of Information Communications Technology, the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, the Secretary of the Presidential Communications Operations Office, Chairperson of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Director General NICA, Director General NSC, Chairperson of the Insurance Commission, and the President of the National Organization of Local Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Officers. That is my last slide, Your Honors. Thank you, and good morning.
Thank you, Secretary Purisima. What is the pleasure of Mr. Chairman? Do we ask questions after each presentation or after everybody has...
I think everybody already, sir, para hindi na matuto.
Do you have other presentations ba? Baka wala naman.
Secretary Solidum, okay.
Question and answer na tayo.
Okay. But by the way, before we proceed, can we ask the Secretariat for if there's anything on record that tells the Oversight Committee why the other resource persons were not able to attend? Or a representative? Yes, please.
Good morning, sir. So we did try our very best to keep on contacting and asking them to attend the hearing, but then there are agencies that cannot commit yet who to send. until today, and there are others who sent their regrets.
When did we send out the invitations? I just want to get this administrative matter off my chest.
Yes, sir. I don't have, but sir,
Anyway, did they send written submissions in response to...
there are no written submissions. These are just verbal communications with the concerned
Anyway,
agencies.
we'll not...
Mr. Chairman, it is unfortunate because my questions will focus on the 4 thematic areas. And I consider the 4 thematic areas as the bedrock of the government's approach, di ba? Sa disaster risk reduction and management. And if the other agencies are not represented, not even represented here, how can we secure the responses of these agencies, from these agencies? For example, at least yung reduction and mitigation or prevention and mitigation nandito in the OST. But we need to ask questions or to secure responses from the ILG that is in charge of preparedness or response, preparedness, DSWD for response, and of course yung DSWD sa rehabilitation and recovery. So ang makakasagot lang dito yung number 1 thematic area, yung first thematic area, which is mitigation and reduction and DOST. But having said that, Mr. Chairman, this representation is thankful to both chairs of the Congressional Oversight Committee because this law was enacted in May or on May 27, 2010. And under Section 27, there's a sunset review provision that within 5 years, this law has to be revisited. And this is an opportune time because, as you mentioned earlier in your opening statement, the Philippines is 3rd most risky in terms of disasters, hindi ba? And there's no need to emphasize the need to really look into this landmark legislation, and it's been 8 years now, and we have not reviewed as mandated under 10121. So anyway, I'll ask my questions later, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lacson. From the DRRNet, would you have any presentation?
We'll just read our statement na lang po, sir.
Yes, please. Then, will you be following this up with
Yes,
submissions
sir.
to your committee?
Yes.
Please, Ms. Ruiz.
Okay, thank you so much. The Philippines is highly exposed to natural hazards such as typhoons, floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. According to the recent World Risk Report, the Philippines' high exposure to natural hazards and vulnerability due to poor economic and social conditions, particularly geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas, ranked it the 3rd most at-risk country among 171 countries. To add to this, it is already experiencing the adverse effects of climate change, such as sea level rise, extreme weather events, and slow onset events. Given this, an effective disaster risk reduction and management system is required. The shift from a reactive disaster management system to a more proactive system brought about by the passage of RA 10121 in 2010 has contributed to a lot of improvements in DRRM. There have been substantial gains, such as the creation of the local DRRM offices and councils, participation of civil society organizations, the creation of local DRRM plans, and the establishment of the local DRRM fund. However, several disasters such as Typhoon Sendong, Pablo, Yolanda, Bohol earthquake, Zamboanga siege, the Marawi crisis, and the 7 years of implementation of the law exposed some of the difficulties and challenges with this current institutional setup for DRRM. So in relation to the sunset review process presented by OCD, the DRRNet Philippines and its member organizations also conducted a series of consultation workshops with different disaster-affected communities as well as other vulnerable local government units in various parts of the country to gather inputs on how to improve Philippine policies on DRRM. So on these consultations, issues on institutional mechanisms, risk assessment, planning, disaster risk governance, finance, and budgeting were raised. The participants of the consultation also presented specific policy recommendations which we have raised as inputs in the development of the amendatory bill with the other members of the NGMC, which DRRNet is a member of, as led by the Office of Civil Defense. We will provide the committee of the copy of our specific policy recommendations. So the Philippines has been a frontrunner in the field of DRRM around the world. Some laws of other countries are even based on our country's experience. So we should continue to set this example by enacting a progressive policy and establishing an independent DRRM agency to ensure the prevention of new and reduction of existing disaster risk towards strengthening resilience and realizing sustainable development. And therefore, DRRNet Philippines strongly support the proposal to pursue the comprehensive evaluation of RA 10121 and consider the establishment of an independent DRRM agency. That would be all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Before we continue, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Amor Tansinco, lead convener of DRRNet. Welcome. And Ms. Claire Balde of NEDA. Good morning.
As I mentioned earlier, there's a need to determine and evaluate the performance of these agencies that are chairing or handling each of the four thematic areas. Kasi doon lang natin ma-assess, so we will know how to approach the revision of the current policy on disaster risk the reduction and management with the end in view of introducing amendments to RA 10121. So first, disaster prevention and mitigation. May we know from the DOST what are the efforts of the government under this thematic area? Pwede po ba kayo mag-provide sa committee ng comprehensive report on this thematic area?
We will provide Senator Lacson, but first of all, let me just give in some remarks of what we have done. And to give you a premise of what needs to be done as a country, we have to look at the various losses in terms of loss of lives, injury, properties, assets, lifelines, which are very important like water, transport, electricity, communication, food, and also public service and businesses, including the environment. So the real goal of disaster risk reduction management would be mainly three: reduce the losses, and that would be the prevention, mitigation, and the preparedness aspect. The second two goals would be ensure effective and efficient disaster response. That would mean that preparedness for response and preparedness how to recover will be done prior to the event. And third is fast recovery and build better if there is a disaster. So the role of the Department of Science and Technology is to provide information, either one, through hazards and impact scenarios, and second is to provide the monitoring and warning information so that people can, and the LGUs can react appropriately and timely according to what we foresee. So in essence, the two main organizations of the Department of Science and Technology, which would be PAGASA and PHIVOX, is actually supported by many other councils of the Department of Science and Technology in terms of support to the academia and other organizations into these different aspects. So we can subdivide the four major outputs of the Department of Science and Technology into four. First is knowing the hazards and the risk. Alamin yung panganib at paano tayo maapektuhan. And so we have been producing hazard and risk maps either through the PHIVOX and PAGASA and also to the DOST-supported activities through the academic institutions. And in particular, we have provided funding for the massive LiDAR mapping of the Philippines, and this is being continued po through the various state universities and colleges where actually beyond flood hazard assessment, the resource mapping, whatever is exposed, including information relevant to agriculture and coastal fishery, are still being done, including forestry. Second is to monitor the event. As we know, PAGASA has been conducting and implementing its modernization program. One of the major activities of PAGASA is to establish 20 Doppler radar by 2020. We have 15? We have 15 so far, and we can actually finish the 20 by next year. 2019. They are also setting up flood forecasting and early warning systems for the 18 major river basins, and they are now handling the nationwide sensors developed by the Department of Science and Technology, Advanced Science and Technology Institute, which supplies free data to all from the different organizations. Pagdating po ng FIVOX, on volcanoes, we can now monitor 8 active volcanoes in real time. Even if we are not in the volcano, we can actually monitor it from the central station and even here using our cell phone, because we have integrated real-time monitoring with earthquake, with GPS, with camera, and other sensors. For earthquake po, we have now 96 earthquake monitoring station, supposedly 97, but because the Marawi seed started, itutuloy na po namin ang pag-install ngayon sa Marawi. So we will be having 100 earthquake stations. Sa tsunami po, we have established 19 nationwide via satellite tsunami detection systems.
You mentioned this earlier, in an earlier hearing, and even before we started this congressional meeting, that you have available application and even platform. How about platform? Meron ba kayong platform?
Meron po tayong Fault Finder platform, and we are in the works of, kasi po sa Fault Finder, you just tap your cell phone and it will tell you the distance. The next project that we will have is, you will just tap the cell phone and all the hazards that the LGU should prepare will appear.
Next question is, how informed are our citizens?
Well,
Kasi mas importante rin yung dissemination, because we know, of course, we in this room, we know that there's an available application and an available platform, ano? Pero ang mas importante yung lalo na sa malalayong lugar. And the other aspect should be dissemination and information. So our citizens, the public will be forewarned and could react timely, no?
So, yun po yung next, sabi natin, knowing the hazard and the risk, then monitor. So, information now should be warned or communicated. And so the hazard and risk communication is a very important part of the job. And definitely, this needs the whole of government, the whole of sector.
As per your assessment, gaano widely disseminated itong inyong application?
Siyempre po yung fault finder sa mga netizen nagagamit ng local government. But we have to be pragmatic about it. There are many local governments, if they're not interested into disaster risk reduction, they don't really, they're not into this different application.
But does OCD have an effort at least to disseminate this further, no, to the citizenry?
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, we conduct our regular community-based disaster risk reduction and management training programs, CBDRRM as we call them, Your Honors. We conduct that. We echo and cascade our efforts, and at the national level, we have these cell broadcast systems in place. We also have the info board in place, and this is in conjunction with RA 10639, the Free Mobile Alert Act for disasters. So we use those.
And your frontline mechanism should be the LGUs, hindi ba?
Yes.
To disseminate. Kasi dyan kayo mayroong direct link eh.
They double up. The LGUs should always double up on the efforts
So may
of the
assessment
national.
pa kayo how widely this is disseminated?
In terms, if we could look at it from the metrics of the training programs conducted, Your Honors, we would have that figure. I just don't have it right now in front of me, but we would have that figure in terms of how many LGUs have been capacitated in terms of community-based DRRM.
Next question, in 2014, yung DNR, DILG, DND, DPWH, and DOST issued Joint Memorandum Circular 2014-1. Are you familiar with this? Dated November 5, 2014, on the adoption of hazard zone classification in areas affected by Yolanda at the time, ano? Kasi we initiated this actually. No, and nandun yung nakaprovide doon yung guidelines for activities, ano? Ang tanong is, were you able to carry out the mandate under this circular?
There are multi-hazards considered in the Yolanda rehabilitation, and the geological hazard maps have no problem because kami lang po ang gumagawa. The main issue there would be that
Multi-hazard.
the other hydrological maps would be done by MGB, by Pagasa, and DOST-supported projects. So in essence po, nagkakaroon po ng pag-uusap po between UP and MGB on the harmonization of the hazard maps that they have. And in the end, dapat people should understand actually po na different maps are produced differently and they have different uses.
What hazards are included in your, yeah?
Sa DOST po, pagdating po ng geological hazards, the mandated organization be anything related to earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, and also we produce earthquake-triggered landslide. Pag-asa would produce storm surge maps and even flood hazard maps in more detail in the water river basin.
Even
And
soil
bring-
liquefaction, di ba?
Sa liquefaction po kasama, pati po sa landslide, sa earthquake,
I think there are 9 hazards
Opo.
identified.
marami po. And then also, pagdating po sa flood, may iba-iba pong focus. Ang Pag-asa po ay nakafocus po sa specific river basins na large-scale mapping. MGB does the nationwide mapping and also DOST.
Meron pa akong questions sa dalawang thematic areas pa, pero wala naman yung representative. So I'll go direct to NEDA. No? Sa inyo yung disaster rehabilitation and recovery. Can NEDA tell us how many disaster rehabilitation and recovery efforts na na-conduct na or have you have so far conducted since the passage of 10121?
Sir, in terms of the preparation of the disaster rehab and recovery program, I don't have the data with me as to how many exactly were prepared, but mostly these are only the major disasters wherein a rehabilitation program was prepared.
Which are?
This includes to highlight just a few, yung Sendong, sir, then we have Pablo, then we have Yolanda. That's basically at the national level, sir. Ito, yes, sir. Ito, sir, yung mga national level coordinated plans. But at the regional level, meron din po, sir, na mga ginawa. Like we have Glenda, meron din yung maliliit lang yung iba, yung sa Bohol, meron din ang Bohol. There's also the Zamboanga Siege, which is isang city lang po siya. Meron din sa Typhoon 1, and the others, sir, hindi ko na matandaan yung exactly. But these are at the regional level po siya.
All in all, how many rehabilitation and recovery plans have been formulated and approved by the approving authority?
Sir, in terms of the process at the national level, lahat po yun na-approve siya at the national level.
Okay. And funded, di ba?
Yes, sir, funded po siya. But like in the case po for Yolanda, meron kasing mga, sir, alam niyo po yan,
Yes.
merong mga specific unit that were created, hindi po siya NDRRMC level yung coordination of the plan formulation. At the regional level naman po, it's the Regional Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Councils that approve this.
How do you monitor the implementation of all those plans?
Yung sa implementation, sir, you mean the monitoring? The monitoring.
That's within your jurisdiction, di ba? Monitoring.
Sir, yung sa monitoring, hindi po siya ginagawa talaga ng NEDA. It's only in the case of Yolanda wherein there's specific memorandum order that was issued for NEDA to really implement the progress of this. But at the regional level, sir, it's basically the RDRRMC with assistance of our NEDA. Pero yung selected disasters lang po through the Regional Disaster Project Monitoring Committee.
And how do you monitor?
Sir, hindi siya yung monitoring like in the case of Yolanda na yung buong plan. It's only the selected key key projects that are included in the monitoring of NEDA at the regional level.
I remember we put up a hub, di ba? Yung empathy. Electronic management platform or monitoring platform for accountability and transparency. That's a hub for Yolanda.
Opo, sir.
So who's using that now? Kasi alam mo, that was funded by USAID and UNDP.
Opo, sir.
With very little or no help at all from the national government, we were able to put that up. And I understand we turned it over to DBM or NEDA. Nasaan na ngayon yun?
Sir, it was supposed to be turned over to DBM, pero hindi po siya tinanggap ng DBM. Currently, it's with the HUD-C. From what I understand po, sir, ginagamit nila itong empathy in monitoring.
So, housing lang?
Housing lang po.
Sayang. Laki ng ginastos ng UNDP doon.
Sir, with the case of sa Marawi, we are exploring ano yung mga existing monitoring platforms, monitoring tools where we can adapt for monitoring Marawi rehab program. And isa po ito sa tinitingnan, yung empathy. But we're still exploring kung ano yung mga pwede na most applicable in the case of Marawi.
In the meantime, I'll defer to the other members of the Oversight Committee, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lacson.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask this question to ASEC Purisima. Have you gone down to the barangay level in dissemination of information? And how many barangays have you?
Good morning, Your Honor. Yes, we have gone down to the barangay level in terms of capacitating LGUs. Kasi po pag ang ginagawa po namin ito sa LGUs, kasama na po yung iba't ibang component ng LGUs. May barangay representative, meron pong representative at yung sa city hall level or sa municipal hall level. So sama-sama na po sila. We're getting the exact data, Your Honors, about exactly the number of LGUs we have capacitated in terms of community-based TRRM. Isusunod ko po yung data, Your Honor. We will send it immediately, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question on that line of questioning. Yeah, ASEC, now, as regard to whether you have gone down to the barangay, because, under Section 12, it says that there shall be established in every province, city, municipality, and a barangay disaster risk reduction and management committee, and in every barangay which shall be responsible for setting the direction, development, implementation, coordination, and disaster risk management program within their territorial jurisdiction. Now, this presupposes that in each barangay, in each province, municipality, and city, there must be a disaster council, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so far ho, base sa inyong pag-aaral, base sa inyong record, ilan ho yung compliant dito sa batas nito?
Overall, Your Honor, meron pong compliance in terms of having a council present, whether and even the committee at the barangay, municipal, city, province, and regional level. Ang medyo nagiging issue po from the perspective of OCD is that some of the disaster risk reduction and management officers, yung officers po mismo, minsan po hindi permanent, minsan concurrent sila, minsan minsan ad hoc, minsan sila po yung building official, minsan sila po yung iba pa pong municipal official. So from that perspective, hindi po nagiging focused yung implementation. At syempre po, part ng reality on the ground, syempre po, pag nagpapalit ho ng local chief executive, minsan napapalitan rin ho yung local DRRM officer. Kaya po may parang may yung issue po sa continuity ng programs. At syempre po, dahil sila na po yung capacitated, pag may bago hong uupo, i-brief na naman po. So medyo may lag in terms of continuing the capacitation and empowerment of our communities. But overall, in terms of the existence of the council, meron naman po yung council. Yun pong officers, yung specific officers po ang medyo nagiging issue, Your Honor.
Kasi, very notable in the discussion of issues and proposed amendments. One of the issues is the lack of coherent and consistent policy on disaster risk assessment. And in fact, sometimes we observe, or it seems to me that the DRR and the climate change adaptation are just on the high-level discourse. Hindi bumababa eh. Kaya may nangyari ng Ordura at nakaraang bagyo. Daming namatay. Hindi naman super typhoon eh. Flooding lang yun. The package of zero casualty, hindi bumababa sa barangay, hindi sila informed eh. And so, I think the discussion must be on the ground. Hindi lang sa atin, hindi lang on a high-level discourse. Good thing, in my home province, Albay, talagang one practice ito. Umulan lang, kung lumakas lang yung ulan, alam na ng from the top to the barangay level, alam na kung ano lang gagawin nila. Hindi na kailangan sabihan. But in some jurisdictions, talagang hindi bumababa eh. Wala yung polisiya na, di ba, you agree with me, Urtuha, dahil yung namatay. So this is one observation that before amending, I think we have to implement first yung batas, yung Section 12. Hindi kailangan i-amend ka agad eh. Tingnan muna natin kung ito talaga yung nai-implement at bumababa. Hindi lang sa level natin.
If I may, Your Honor, that is true. Although some of the LGUs implement in one form or another a disaster management protocol. Now, it should be standardized, I agree, with the national level protocols, especially pursuant to RA 10121. But to specifically discuss, Your Honor, if I may, Ordua and Vinta, ang nangyari po dyan, for example, and allow me to take you through the time in motion we did at the NDRMC level, nagkaroon na po ng alerts at our level, dinisseminate na po namin yon at the regional levels. Ang naging problema po, according to certain metrics of our national government agencies, like for example, flood and landslide susceptibility, hindi pa ho some of the provinces, hindi pa po pasok at that period dun sa metrics na yon, because we do not want to unnecessarily alert or make people worry, no? Pag hindi pa tayo sigurado na pasok na sila dun sa metrics na yon. Pero po, nung pasok na ho sila dun sa metrics, there was now the issue of disseminating it on the ground. But that being said, yun, kasi nagka-brown out na po, wala na pong signal, so nagka-issue na po on dissemination. Nung sigurado na po talaga tayo na pasok sila dun sa path ng weather disturbance. So ang issue po in that sense, Your Honor, is that nagkaroon naman po ng general alert. Ang Pag-asa po nagpapadala, and even before the low pressure area was identified, the path of the low pressure area then was identified, naglabas na po ng advisory ang Pag-asa. Kasama na po yan sa ating advisories at the regional and local levels. Ngayon na po, dun sa specific advisories na sigurado na po tayo, yung tatamaan niya, yung kanyang path, nagkaroon na po ng wala na pong kuryente, wala na pong signal, yun ang isa kong nakakontribute nun. But in terms of the general advisory na may bagyo at may parating, identified naman po yan, meron na pong tayong previous alerts pagdating dyan. Doon na lang po sa very close, very specific advisories na identify ho natin, yun na lang po, yung dissemination issue. So, it's really a mix of factors, Your Honor.
Just to follow up, how equipped is our Pag-asa in disseminating our weather situation?
Magandang umaga po. Ganito po yung nangyari dito sa Urduha, yung tumama dun sa Visayas. Yung ating pong Pag-asa is divided into 5 regional services. Isa po yung Visayas na nandun sa Cebu, Mactan. Ngayon, yung aming tao, connected sa mga DRRMO officers. Nagtataka siya, yung papalapit na yung bagyo o patatama na yung bagyo, ay hindi na sumasagot yung DRRM officer. Siguro na wala na nga siguro yung communication link. Dahil we are very dependent on yung provider natin ng telco. Text message po. Yun yung text message doon sa from our nagraradyo din po, pero yun yung mas maano ko yung text kasi naka-ano yun naka-craft talaga yung message kung ano yung papadala. Yung DRRM officer doon sa Biliran, hindi na po sumagot yung bandang huli.
Ang problema po sa text message, minsan kinabukasan dumarating, even under normal conditions, wag na yung merong typhoon. Minsan kami, experience natin, I think you have experienced this, ano? May nag-text sa inyo, hindi kayo nag-reply, kinabukasan darating yung text message. Yes.
Ang bagyo may signal, ang cellphone wala na. So, essentially, I'd like to reinforce the statement of Representative Garbing that the real issue here is the protocol at the local level. Kasi we know that during times of disaster, communication will be very poor. So at the local level talaga, dapat po may protocol. Hindi naman kailangan diktahan sila na ikaw ay tatamaan sa Tuesday. There is a forecast in advance, including the rainfall. So the real issue is like what is being done in Albay. There is a protocol that must be observed from the province down to the barangay level.
Another issue po, ito naman yung parokyal sa Albay. You know, I came from the province where we lost the most beautiful volcano in the world and the most active volcano in the country, where every 3 years, every 2 to 4 years, correct me if I'm mistaken, Yusuf, talagang meron ka dapat. Tama po ba? Tatlo, apat.
Well, there's sometimes 1 year lang po, but the statement is correct. It frequently erupts.
Ngayon, yung problema po namin na hinaharap every time there's a million eruption, pareho lang naman, which is the evacuation centers. Sa tagal na tagal ng pinag-uusapan namin ito, yun pa rin ang problema sa Albay. Ako naman po yung tutuwa dahil dito po sa discussion of issues and proposed amendments, sa issue dito yung lack of acceptable evacuation centers in local government units ay ito na yung problema namin sa Albay. Now, one of your responsibilities in work is to improve the latest effective and efficient response in the fast recovery. And you also made mention of when you speak of disaster preparedness, we establish and strengthen the capacities of the communities to anticipate, recover, and cope from the negative impacts of emergency occurrences and disasters. Una, we take those residents within the 6 kilometers danger zone pataas, depende sa alert level, in order to take them out of danger. But when we place them in an evacuation center, which is not really designed as an evacuation center, but as classrooms, doon na nagiging problema. Instead of giving them to cope with the negative impact of the disasters, the negative impact persists as long as mayon eruption or as long as mayon erupts. Hindi ko nakakakope. Ang nangyayari pa dito, na-apektahan ako yung klase o yung edukasyon ng ibang pag-aaral. Dahil yung classroom ginagamit as evacuation centers. And so it's really high time for those LGUs to identify areas that will be the site for permanent evacuation centers. So ang pag-uusap po rin sa inyo, when you submit your expenditure program for 2019 budget, isama nila po yung permanent evacuation centers sa Legazpi, sa Canali, sa Baraga, sa Malilipot, Santo Domingo, Watts, Ginabatan, and Digao. So, ito yung palaging problema natin. It creates so much disturbance sa mag-aaral po, and at the same time sa mga evacuees. And to me, that we're trying to avoid mas lalo nagiging apparent because yung sakit, hindi yung malayo mangyari yung epidemia doon na sa classrooms na kung saan dikit-dikit po. Hindi yung kasi design as an evacuation centers. Salamat po.
Thank you, Your Honor. In fact, just last week, there was a meeting among OCD, NHA, DILG, DPWH, and DSWD regarding the evacuation centers, Your Honor. And we're moving forward in that regard. And in fact, DILG is the one that has a barangay-level evacuation center program that I think involves a little counterpart funding from the local government units. So meron na po sila, kasi po yung sa DPWH regional level naman po yung evacuation centers na ginagawa ng DPWH. So meron pong ginagawa at the regional level, meron din pong ginagawa at the more basic levels of our local government units, particularly the barangays, at DILG naman po ang nag-i-implement nitong programa na to, Your Honor.
Nasasabi ko po ito dahil kakaiba yung mga evacuees eh. Hindi ito yung mga evacuees na gawa ng bagyo na overnight, babalik na sila sa kanilang tirahan. Ito, minimum isang buwan, nasa evacuation centers po sila. So, nandun na talaga yung pagkakaiba as compared to the others. Now, dito sa, this will be my last question. Dito sa utilization ng inyong pondo, yung 70% under Section 22, National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Fund. Hindi ba reflected po rin dito?
That is at the LGU. That 70-30 division, Your Honor, is at the LGU level, and they can use that.
They can use that.
Ideally, that's the first resource that they should tap. That they should tap to do those disaster preparedness activities, Your Honor.
And that includes the construction of permanent evacuation centers.
That may include that disaster preparedness activities, Your Honor. So,
disaster.
malawak naman po yung sakop ng 70% at kaya naman po yan ipasok doon. And ideally, yan po yung dapat una nilang galawin. In fact po, Your Honor, pag nagre-request po ang local government unit sa amin at the national level ng funding, we ask first kung ano po yung status ng kanilang local dream fund, particularly the 70%. Kasi yun naman pong 70%, Your Honors, naiipon naman po yan for the next 5 years. And after 5 years na nare-revert po yan dun sa parang general fund nila. But for the next 5 years, pwede naman po nila yan itap for those preparedness and prevention mitigation activities, Your Honor.
Follow po lang yung tanong kanina ni Congressman Kalalang. How prepared are our students or general populace dito sa mga disasters kung dumarating? Meron kayong statistics lang kung paano na-train na natin sila tungkol sa preparedness tungkol sa earthquake, tsunami, or typhoon, fire, whatever. Meron kayong statistics lang, meron kayong data tungkol sa...
Your Honor, thank you for the question. We would have to get the exact statistics from DepEd as part of their preparedness program. That being said, Your Honor, quarterly we have the earthquake drills, and we have the CBDRRM activities. But we will get that statistics. Patuloy naman po yung ating capacitation sa ating sa mga estudyante. Kasama na rin po ito sa kanilang curriculum, yung kanilang pinapag-aralan. So patuloy naman po ito, Your Honor.
Yeah, kung pwede, centralize nyo na yung pag-account sa kanila kung ginagawa nila. I've been a governor for 9 years. Pagkatapos yun yung hinahanap namin, pinag-uusapan namin, I require that actually sa aming mga town mayors para sila din ang mag-account sa kanilang mga schools, sa mga out-of-school youth, mga organizations, whatever. To include even factories, mga ganun, diba? Alam nila dapat lahat yun. So, kung quarterly dapat meron na kayo. Kayo na lang sa national, kayo na lang mag-monitor niyan sa kanila, or mag-remind pa eh. Yes,
Suggestion po ako, I mean, this is a suggestion that I've been advocating. Ang mga bata, takot sa teacher. So, natitrain natin. Pero pagdating sa mga parents, minsan hindi. So, ang isang suggestion ko po, kung pwedeng bigyan ng assignment ang mga bata na sasagutin ng buong family, a series of questions for an earthquake evacuation planning and preparedness planning, then another assignment for flood, another for fire. This has been done. I observed it in Armenia when I evaluated the program in one school only. So, tinangka na po ng DepEd po yun noong panahon ni Secretary Luistro. But it can be institutionalized. That way, this is an innovative way of doing things. It can be forced. And it will be very helpful po. Thank you. Armenia po, and then may nag-test po sa Longo po, ginawa nila ng law ewan ko lang kung ano yung implementation.
Actually, dapat gawin natin yun kasi sa mga barangays, paano mo naman yung mga barangay kapitan natin kung ano mga pinag-report lang yan Dapat may monitoring tayo, malalaman talaga kung talagang nangyayari doon. Yung lowest sa barangay. So, regulation natin, gaya ng sabi mga kanina, karamihan ng mga officials natin sa DRRM sa baba, panay mga ano to, hindi actually full-time doon. In addition to other duties, karamihan dyan, di ba? So, ganun dapat itong importante, yung monitoring natin kung ano nangyayari dito sa implementation natin batas, no? Yun lang ang point ko.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, if I may just share, ang DILG ho meron hong tinatawag na as head of the preparedness cluster or the preparedness thematic area of NDRMC, meron ho sila yung tinatawag nating Operation Listo. Ito po yung kanilang preparedness guides sa mga mayor, sa local chief executives. At ito rin po yung minomonitor natin. We'll get the relevant statistics for the committee, Your Honor, including the statistics on school preparedness. We will request that and consolidate that from the figures of DepEd, and we will submit a report to the committee, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask OCD, no? Yung sinabi kanina ni Yusek Solidum, yung protocol natin is driven by complete, timely, and accurate information. Now, my question, baka redundant na itong question na ito, no? Pero, do we have a mechanism, a centralized receptacle for that kind of quantitative and qualitative information na ida-download natin? Buti nabanggit ni Yusek Solidum kanina na actually pala, yung frontline natin dyan, yung pamilya. We cannot give, that's our strongest political, social, and economic unit. So ang first line of defense natin, kung anong information ang nasa pamilya. Then we go out to the streets, to the barangay, until we hit the more institutionalized structures, no, like local government units. So my question is, Purissima, is this, if that receptacle, that mechanism is existing, is it above you or below you? Or with you?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It is with the NDRRM Operation Center. That information, our information hub is the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Operation Center at Camp Aguinaldo.
Okay.
Now, we get the information, we get it from our warning agencies, namely Pag-asa, PHIVOLCS, MGB, Mines and Geosciences Bureau. Pag sinend ho nila yan sa amin, yung information na yan, we will develop the messaging to be given to the regions and provinces to be affected. Minsan po localized yung pagpapadala ho natin. Kagaya ho nung Vinta and Orduha, ang pinadalan ho natin yung mga maapektuhan ng path. Kasi po bago po dumating ang isang bagyo or weather disturbance, meron po tayong tinatawag na pre-disaster risk assessment o PIDRA na ginaganap. Ito po pinapatawag po ng NDRRMC, yung member agencies nila namin, at nag-a-assess ho kami. Ina-assess ho namin based on the information to be given by Pag-asa kung saan po papunta yung bagyo. Ina-alert na po natin, or weather disturbance, ina-alert na po natin yung mga probinsya at mga rehiyon na tatamaan nitong bagyo. And specifically, pag malapit na po yung bagyo, pinapadala na ho natin ng mobile alerts through cell broadcast system and through our what we call infoboard, yung mga specific regions and specific provinces. Kagaya po kanina, doon nung pumutok po ulit ang Mayon volcano kaninang 8:39 if I'm not mistaken, around 8 o'clock this morning. From that information given by FIVOX, we developed it into a message and we sent it to the province of Albay. Yung mga subscribers na nasa Albay lang po ang makakakuha nun. Hindi ho natin iniistorbo yung mga ibang, kaya po may mga nagtatanong sa amin, ba't hindi ako naka-receive nitong alert na to? Ba't hindi ko to na-receive? Localized po kasi yun. We identify the provinces. And given the cell broadcast technology that we have, that our telcos have, kung nandun po kayo sa lugar na yon, makukuha niyo po yon. We do not mine, we do not farm your numbers, we do not know your numbers. That technology just sends it out to all the cellular phones in that area. So existing po yung ganong technology.
I'm not beating this issue to death, no? Actually, ASEC Purisima, kayo alam niya, nakakaintindi. But to me, listening to you, what we want to do really is to shift from a reactive to proactive mode. Ang punto ko lang dito, again, no, I'm not, yung baseline data, yung na magdadrive ng protocols, dapat hindi yan dependent sa variables like telco services. Diba? Murphy's Law, worst case scenario, walang telco, walang cell site, walang text, wala, zero. So dapat, ang reaction ng bawat pamilya, bawat community, bawat LGU, must be based on this volume and quality of information that will allow them to proactively react. Okay, that's just my point. Now, we'll expect some submissions, no? You can relate this to my next question. Tiningnan ko dun sa presentation ninyo yung organizational fill-up. Alam mo, ASEC Purisima, no? From our little experience here, pag humihingi kami ng data, binibigyan kami ng numero. Okay? I mean, this is right up the alley, no? The SND sits at the top of all this. Sa sundalo, ang operational readiness criteria ay move, communicate, and shoot. Huwag na yung shoot. Move and communicate. Your organizational fill-up proactively should allow your Congress, the power of the purse, no, with our oversight function, no, to determine how it impacts on your ability to move and communicate and react. Okay. So maybe you would want to submit to us so that we can also start thinking ahead and plan how we can enhance this at family level. Example, minsan nababalitaan lang sa news, no? Yung mga tsunami-threatened communities sa Japan, nagmamarathon. Okay? I'm just one. This might be a matter of interest for you, no? Pag nagmarathon sila, ang direction is papunta sa high ground yung marathon. That's the kind of conditioning para every day. Parang national security. National security is not only the business of the security sector, it's everybody's business. Okay? And when we reduce it to basic constitutional principles like protection of life, liberty, and property, especially our children, our most precious and strategic resource, we better be one step ahead of typhoon, earthquake, or tsunami. That's just my point. No? So can you submit to your committee? Give us an idea of how your organizational fill-up impacts on your ability to communicate. The learning curve, ASEC Purisima, no, I don't know if you will agree, does not happen where we are. It happens at the lowest level. That's how you develop a proactive attitude na armed with this kind of information, you breathe, live, think, feel disaster, whether it's man-made. Then maybe that should set in motion. Okay? I'm just putting that on the table. Now, may I ask Meda, Ms. Balde, meron na ba tayong performance, well, Senator Lacson is here, no? Yes, ground level experience. Let's say, bakit hindi pa tapos yung Yolanda at bakit hindi pa tapos yung Zamboanga?
The better question, pardon me, Mr. Chairman, the better question is, may natapos ba? In terms of implementation?
Dahil, di ba, Ms. Balde, no? Our starting point is not zero. It's, bakit? What happened? Bakit may evacuees pa sa Zamboanga? Man-made. And may displaced pa sa Tacloban. So, maybe, retroactively, we conduct a performance audit of where we have been in this regard and then factor it in our sunset review. Okay, would you want to comment?
Sir, as to the Yolanda, currently it's not anymore with NEDA yung monitoring. It has been transferred to CABSEC, Cabinet Secretariat na po na-transfer yung monitoring. Para sa pagkakaalala ko, as of nung transfer namin, siguro nasa around 70% na yung completion niya.
How much of the 167 billion has been utilized or obligated?
Hindi ko sir alam yung exact figure on that, pero yung level of monitoring kasi na namin na ginagawa is more on the PPAs that were completed. So yun yung reference namin in terms of
So
the
completion lang ng
70%.
PPAs ang
Opo,
minomonitor, o PAPs ang minomonitor ninyo?
Yes, sir. Mostly, ang natitira na lang po ng mga projects that were not completed is on housing and some livelihood projects. Yun po natitira. But most of the infra and pati sir yung mga social services related na interventions, natapos na po siya for Yolanda. Ano na nga yun, sir? Opo, sir. In terms of sa monitoring naman kung bakit hindi pa siya, sir, natatapos. Kasi, siguro, sir,
Forgive me for intervening. No? Then it will speak to us about continuity, about sustainability,
May support na.
about predictability.
Yusek.
Okay. Tumawid na yung Yolanda and Zamboanga from one administration to another. So nagkakalimutan na naman yata, no? Whatever, this is actually, please forgive me for these questions, no? Ito yung institutional damage, di ba? Na nangyari sa atin. Ngayon, new administration, I'm not blaming you, no? I'm just asking. We are pointing in another direction. Di ba? Pinasa na yung performance audit somewhere. So maybe that's part of what we have to do. Make this, well, not really engrave this in stone, make this airtight, insulate it from every administration para tuloy-tuloy. We have a means of evaluating this, no? Properly, qualitatively and quantitatively. Yusek Navarro, you wanted to assist, to provide support. Yes.
Your Honor, please let us have a few minutes to discuss because I just came from another commitment and
No, it's okay. Don't worry. We didn't want to just siguro just submit to your committee initially your thoughts on this matter, no? Para we can yes, please.
well taken note po sa yung observation nyo. We'll look into this po kung paano natin. Kasi talagang yung monitoring, that's really one of the
By the way,
challenges din na.
Kaya ako naman kinikwento sa inyo ito dahil the head of NEDA is technically the President of the Republic. Correct? The most powerful presidency in this planet. When the President says, I want this to move, it will move. So this has to happen, I think, at your level. Yusek Navarro, no? So, isama ninyo yan sa submissions ninyo para we can you know, develop some traction, okay? Now, last question before we proceed, no? Yusek Solidum, kanina my curiosity was, sabi nyo yung ibang LGU, kahit na anong pukpok ninyo, parang wala sa universe nila yung disaster risk. Now, from where you sit, for purposes of legislative intervention, what kind of offer can we give to the LGUs which they cannot refuse? How do we hammer this in their mindset para what? From where we sit, no? I can understand it's a technical matter, no? But ano pa ba ang pwedeng gawin natin para maintindihan ng LGU na life and death ito? Life and death ito.
Well, one of the reasons why some LGUs do not really focus on disaster risk reduction simply because they have not experienced a major disaster in their lifetime.
Bago kayo magpatuloy, buti, they have not experienced. There's this school of thought developing, okay? The theories of symmetry and asymmetry. Yung nagdi-decide, kaya siguro pakaang-kaang, dahil hindi tinatamaan. Di ba? Whether good or bad yung outcome. Now, the challenge, I guess, before us is to make sure na when they make decisions or make plans at whatever level, no, pag tinamaan yung local government, pag may biktima yung disaster or may beneficiary because of proactive planning, it impacts on them. Now, how do we develop a mechanism at local government level para they will share in the outcome? They are not insulated. Okay, please.
That's why the premise that I mentioned is very important to the next statements that I will make. My real advocacy, and as part of the Department of Science and Technology, is to produce disaster imagination scenarios. The reason why people die or they do not prepare is simply one, they have not experienced, but the real reason is we have a lack of disaster imagination by not seeing what can happen to them based on the information that are given. So we need to develop scenarios. Very good example po yung tinatawag na the big one in Metro Manila. If we have not developed that hazard and impact scenario complete with the devastation stories, then people will not react. I'm very happy that even up to the President, this has been really the major focus. Kaya nga po lilipat kayo sa BGC din po dahil narinig nyo. So for every local government, the first thing that as a country we need to prepare are large-scale natural disasters, Yolanda scale. If you're able to produce those scenarios beforehand, even the recovery planning will be done before disasters would happen. Kaya nga po, mahirapan din po talaga kung sinong naka-assign dyan kasi hindi yan anticipated beforehand. But if we are able to develop those scenarios that need to be done at the national, regional, and local level, we talk of the same scenario but we do our own thing depende sa pay grade natin. So that is the thing that we need to develop and we hope that the LGUs can understand this. Ayoko naman ng mga penalty thing, but it's up to us and the whole of the society to be able to develop these disaster imagination scenarios, science-based scenarios.
Well, taking off from the earlier comments, Mr. Lacson, mukhang napaganda tuloy yung discussion natin na hindi umattend yung iba, no? Well, no, I'm just side comment. Don't take me seriously. My last question is a legal question. Isek Purisima, are you a lawyer?
Yes, Your Honor.
You are a lawyer. Good. Okay. From a purely legal, I'll reduce this to ground level, no? Pag forced evacuation, yung ayaw umalis dahil ayaw iwanan yung alagang kalabaw, ano? On whose side is the law? Pag binuhat mo yung matanda o yung the entire family and load them forcibly into a waiting M35 6x6, but are the soldiers liable legally or constitutionally pag sapilitan?
In my view, Your Honor, they would not be liable because, first of all, especially, and this is a question raised by our AFP and our PNP in our evolving discussions also in preparing the amendatory bill, Your Honor. Concern ho nila yun. Dahil ang perspective is walang maayos na legal cover for forced evacuation. But that being said, Your Honor, there is a general welfare clause in the local government code. And number two, there are at least 2 memorandum circulars all issued by the DILG with respect to forced evacuation. And number 3, Your Honor, we've already included a provision on forced evacuation in the proposed amendatory bill because we want to embody it in the law. We want to institutionalize it. But that being said, as of now, based on the available authorities, they would not be liable, particularly grounding it on the general welfare clause of the local government
I
code.
wanted to say if you can talk in English, no, but anyway, no, what I'm saying is this kind of information downloaded to our soldiers and policemen who are engaged in,
I would like to believe that they have been downloaded particularly to our PNP personnel, Your Honor, because the MCs were issued by the DILG. Naturally, they would have an interface with NAPOLCOM, but I don't have the data, Your Honor, whether they have been fully
actually,
downloaded.
okay na sana ako dun sa sinabong the law, the Constitution will be on the side of those who will engage in forced evacuation. Dahil the last thing you need when you're a policeman or a soldier is yung kasuhan ka dahil pinilit mo. That's the last thing you need in your career. Okay, so I just wanted to express that to you para you can convert this into a system that the LGUs, the ones who will deploy all these limited and prioritized resources, will be aware of this para we cover all bases. Okay. Thank you.
We'll do that, Your Honor. And as an anecdote, if I may just share, yung iba ko, ang ginagawa in fact is, inuuna kong evacuate yung livestock. Sumusunod ho yung tao pagka in-evacuate yung livestock.
That's
So
interesting.
baka kailangan rin po ng evacuation center for the livestock.
As Yusek Solidum, you should start thinking out of the box, no? Imaginative. So kung susunod, unahin na lang evacuate yung wala namang danger na kasuhan ka nung baka o nung kalabaw. Okay. Yes, Yusek Navarro, please.
Very briefly, Your Honor, and to add to what has been discussed by our NEDA Division Chief, I think one crucial element that will respond to your question earlier is monitoring. So there is a plan, rehabilitation plans that has been done for Zamboanga, for Yolanda through the OPAR previously led by Senator Lacson, and then for other disasters. But right now, it seems that the production of termination or terminal reports, which are actually part of a monitoring system, that has not been religiously complied with. So right now, we are looking at the monitoring system at the NDRIMC, and NEDA would like to help the Office of the Civil Defense set up a monitoring system. Previously, USEC Halad requested NEDA to be the sort of monitor, but I think it should be the Office of Civil Defense and the future DRRM authority or agency, which should do that systematically. But NEDA is willing to help formulate, identify what the monitoring system should be and what kinds of reports should be produced to say whether the disaster rehabilitation plan has been substantially completed or not yet completed, and who will do that after, say, a project monitoring office has been dissolved. So that is right now missing.
Okay, last comment before we recognize Senator Lacson. Ngayon lang ba kayo nagkita-kita?
No, sir. We're helping each other.
No, I'm asking. Nagkikita, I'm not talking socially. I'm just saying, do you see each other in a mechanism provided for by law where you are able to exchange?
NDRIMC meeting, sir.
Okay, good. Because I think what this tells us, Yusek Navarro, is you should start improving on this mechanism for communicating. That's where the good ideas come from. Okay, under less pressure maybe. Okay, thank you. Senator Lacson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me gather your thoughts on behalf of the committee, individually and collectively. If we were to introduce amendments to RA 10121 and even consider the creation of a separate agency that will lead sa lahat ng matters pertaining to disaster, ano yung na-envision niya na organizational structure? What other agencies should be integrated under that organization? Kasi right now, mukhang may problema to sa council type system, di ba?
And of course, there's the OCD, which is the secretariat at saka yung technical arm. Pero mukhang maraming gaps eh. Ang dami-daming hindi natin na-address. Like what Yusek Navarro mentioned earlier, ipapasa yata sa inyo yung monitoring, but they have the RPMC, di ba? Yung Regional Project Monitoring Councils, down to the regional, even provincial levels. Although hindi man ito eh. Hindi talaga ito walang full complement. So, ano yung nakikita niyong organizational structure noong agency? Whether it's a department or an agency under the Office of the President, which I will support, by the way, because ito yung before I left OPAR, ito yung iniwanan kong recommendation kay President Pinoy noon, na it's about time that we created a separate agency, even under the Office of the President, para talaga merong lead agency. Kasi ngayon, medyo sabog eh. Mahirap yung council type system na coordinative, tapos taga-integrate lang, puro monitoring ang nangyayari. So there must really be a separate agency, lead agency, who will take care and assume responsibility. So your thoughts nga?
Thank you, Your Honor. There is a push now for the creation of a separate department for that purpose, Your Honor. And in fact, there are several bills pending before the House of Representatives and also before the Senate. And the OCD and also other members of the NDRMC are participating in that. Sa House po kasi nasa TWG level yung bill. Meron na pong, it is pending before the Joint Defense and Government Reorganization Committees. And there is already a TWG headed by Congressman Joey Salceda. And that is where the efforts now at the House level, yes, Your Honor, and the government agencies are being requested to submit their counterpart bills, and OCD has just finished its counterpart measure because we added certain provisions based on new policies adopted by the NDRMC. But what we can see, bottom line, Your Honor, it is, you're correct, that there should be a form of like a unitary command that will deal with disasters day-to-day. Ngayon po kasi, it's basically the NDRMC and OCD shepherding things, but we have also limitations as a bureau of the DND. And DND, there's been previous pronouncements also by the Secretary of National Defense that he is in line with this unitary command concept, to including the elevation of OCD to a department-level agency as part of that suggestion, and integrating some government agencies into that new agency or housing.
And I understand you already submitted your legislative proposal in this regard.
The initial, the history, Your Honor, is that the initial output of the Sunset Review, because one of its output is a draft amendatory bill, that was filed, that earlier version was filed by Congressman Salceda around, if I'm not mistaken, April 2016. So as early as April 2016, may nakasalang na po yung initial version ng draft amendatory bill that was a result of the Sunset Review. But we continually improved on it, Your Honor, and we will be submitting an updated draft as early as next week to the Defense and Reorganization
The
Committee.
Senate Committee Chairman is more than willing to catch up with the House legislative effort.
We will submit
Kung
it.
nasa TWG na sila, maganda yun because we can, kaya lang mayroong bill si Senator Ligarda na right sizing naman, na ini-sponsor din na Malacanang. How do we reconcile a right sizing the bureaucracy bill with the creation of another department?
If I may address
Sige
that, if I may address
But
that
of course,
issue, Your Honor.
ano naman talaga, very important na meron talaga tayong, kasi number 3 nga tayo sa buong mundo sa disaster di ba? So, sige.
As part of the right-sizing effort of government, Your Honor, and of course this comes with a bias in favor of NDRMC and OCD, because we should look at disaster risk reduction and management as an investment on the part of the government and not as a cost. There was a previous study by the UNDP, quoted by JICA, that for every dollar spent in disaster preparedness, you save $7 in terms of disaster response. And so that's that has been repeated in several international conferences.
What is the practice in other countries ba? Do they have
an agency dedicated solely sa disaster?
That is the
What
evolving...
countries are these?
In ASEAN, in fact, Your Honor, I think most of our ASEAN counterparts have department level or ministry level DRRM agencies. These are generically called
Ano yung pinaka-adaptable sa Philippine scene?
a
Which
separate
model?
In terms of models, Your Honor, kasi mostly kasi sa kanila under the Prime Minister's office. Iba kasi yung government setup nila. Sa atin, Your Honor, we can do with a separate department level agency, not necessarily attached to the Office of the President, but as a separate department, and with actually, this is part of the comments of some agencies dahil because there's a council now, admittedly, dahil kailangan mo i-consulta yung council, tumatagal relatively. So, with a separate department, the council can be transformed into an advisory, to have an advisory role as opposed to a policy-making role because yun na pong policy, gagawin na po yun ng department and the secretary, and of course, ultimately, the approval of the president.
Yusek? Silito.
In most countries, the civil defense group are civil defense. The science organizations are separate. Just to emphasize, because of course there are plans to move PIVOX and Pag-asa under. So just to give you a perspective of what the styles are. Thank you.
How about How about climate
Senator
change?
Lacson,
Sige.
just on that point, Yusek Solginum, would you venture an answer why? Bakit hiwalay?
Hindi ko po alam kung bakit sa ibang bansa hiwalay po sila. Hindi ko alam kasi the science people are usually science. They don't want to be influenced by many other things. Just what they see, they say.
No, my point really is maybe that's food for thought, Yusek Purisima. No? Find out why. That's the first question you should ask and answer. Why? Diba? Why hiwalay? Is it cultural? Is it historical? Is it what does the data say? That will move us in certain direction. So because I'm not inclined naman, no, this is my thoughts, no, to just because this is the global trend, kakaiba tayo mga Pilipino. You know that for a fact, di ba? Iba talaga tayo, iba tayo mag-isip, you know. In fact, our cop-out reason for every question is basta. Period. Okay. End of discussion. I'm sorry. Yes.
So, may model na purely Office of Civil Defense, Disaster Management, then the science agencies are separate. In Italy, it's a little bit different. They have a civil defense, but they have scientists inside the civil defense. Permanent po yun. But the science organizations are also separate. For example, our counterpart, Weather Bureau and PHIVOX, would be separate science agencies, but then within the OCD, they have people to receive the information. So actually my suggestion is to beef up OCD, but they need to have technical people that should manage technical programs that they should also be leading. That's the other model. Thank you.
Senator Lacson, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes,
Secretary, please.
thank you, Your Honors, and thank you for gathering our thoughts. And because this is an organizational meeting, this is a really important occasion, and we really need to study the proper setup. And NEDA supports the setting up of the creation of a Department of Disaster Resilience or DRRM authority, and then the vice chairpersons, the roles of the vice chairpersons, hopefully can be absorbed by that newly created agency, because we really need, a special focus on managing disasters. Now, with respect to the current proposal, at least at the House, to absorb some science agencies into the agency, NEDA views that research, scientific research is very important, and we need to really look at that as a separate activity and revisit that suggestion, whether it's really necessary. Perhaps what's needed is, just to, as mentioned earlier, beef up the capacity of the agency, the newly created agency on using science-based data. Now, with respect to climate change, that's something that we should also look at, and it should fit the Philippines' needs. And there are slow onset events which will result in high-impact disasters, and perhaps, so NEDA is also looking at that. No, perhaps that can be absorbed, subsumed, no, but it's controversial. NEDA does not yet have a final opinion, but we are entertaining the possibility of a climate change adaptation being undertaken by an agency that also deals with disaster risk reduction and management. Now, Senator Lacson mentioned the National Project Monitoring Council and its counterparts, Regional Project Monitoring Council, given the need to have a really strong focus on disaster-related projects and plans, the implementation of this, and therefore the monitoring of this. We think that that monitoring function should be performed by that to be created agency to give the focus that it deserves. Right now, there are many, kasi you see naman the investment program, it's growing and growing, and there are also additional functions for the whole NPMC system, which is, by the way, a council. There are new projects that will have to be monitored even at the
Although the
facilitation
mandate
stage.
of the RPMC, hindi naman limited sa disaster-related PAPs, di ba?
Yes.
Kasama ito sa mga infra
Yes,
ng
sir.
national government.
Many projects.
Yes.
So that's why we need to have, special focus. It's, if possible, in the bill that will be created, ihiwalay natin yung monitoring for disaster risk reduction. Those are my thoughts at this point, Your Honor.
Maybe from the...
Thank you,
sorry.
Yusek Navarro. Yes, Senator Lacson. I just wanted to thank Yusek Navarro for her input. Yes.
Maybe from the conveners, your thoughts? Please contribute.
The DRNF believes, sir, to have yung proposal to have a standalone agency, which will have is at par with other national departments of the government, with the head being at the level of a secretary, which will enjoy the prestige and mandate of a full-blown department, allowing it to chart its own DRM plan, programs, projects, and activities without having to compete for prioritization and resources from a larger unit. So they should be given the power to implement and monitor their own programs and project, its own bureaucracy that will allow it to perform beyond coordinative functions, and can be tasked to actually spearhead the implementation of the country's DRRM framework.
Isa lang, one additional point before it escapes me, no? Kanina banggit natin yung sa prevention mitigation. When we approved the franchise of GMA 7, in-incorporate na namin ito, recurring provision na ito. They will allocate 10% of the time of their paid commercials to government. Kaya i-demand ninyo na sa dissemination ninyo, meron kayong 10% of the time allotted to paid commercials. Lahat ng radio, TV stations, nasa mandato yan, nasa batas. So, in case you were not still aware of that, no? That's a relatively new provision which, by the way, I introduced. No?
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
No. Lahat ng franchise recurring ito, although, siyempre, pantay-pantay ito, pag dumating yung franchise, hindi effective because they appealed, no? Na pwedeng, ganun ba yung ano? Sabay-sabay implementation, but it's already in the franchise law that gave the GMA 7 to operate for another 25 years.
Mr. Chair, just a point of information. We in the House of Representatives in the Committee on Franchise, we always observe the equality clause when we give franchise. And so if it is applicable to one property, it is applicable to all. So, to the question of from Pagasa, it will be applicable to all franchising holder.
Built-in na yan, di ba? You can utilize yung sa mga text blast during disasters.
Yes, Your Honor.
Wala nun. Free of charge na yan, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Sir,
Thank you,
pwede.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir, pwede.
Mr.
As I was listening, gusto ko lang dagdagan yung mga komentaryo ng everybody tungkol dito sa new department na i-create natin. Tinitingnan ko kanina itong ating mga gusto nyo iamindahan dito. Wala akong makita rito na sasagot dito sa mga problema ng mga disasters na nangyayari. Kasi yung observation, galing din kasi ako sa police, galing ako sa military, guys. Kalimbawa, yung hinihiling po sa Albay, nung pa po nasa serbisyo, 20 years ago, hinihiling na po sila doon na evacuation center. Ngayon po yung pa rin hinihiling nila. Kasi yung program doon sa Pangasinan naman, nung nagkabaha doon na malaking baha, nung mga 20 years ago, yung ginawa naman doon, ang sabi ko, provincial director kasi ako, nung sabi ko, kailangan dito ka sa Agno River, i-dredge. Sabi ko sa kanila, pero ang ginawa nila, gumawa yata ng 15 na evacuation centers. Sa awa ng Diyos, hindi pa po nagamit yun kahit minsan. Kaya nag-gobernador ako, bumili ako ng 2 dredger, dredge po namin yung river, na tapat ng mga sa downstream. Hindi na po nababaha ngayon yung downstream na yun. What I'm trying to say here is, tuwing may disaster, doon lang tayo magagaling ang solusyon sinasabi natin. Kagaya ng sa Albay, kung gumawa tayo ng evacuation centers na yun, hindi tayo nakakita siguro ng mga estudyante doon na isang buwan na hindi papasok dahil ginagamit yung mga classrooms nila, di po ba? Ganun din po sa Pangasinan, na kumatandang po yung Cosme, punta po ko sa Senado rito nun, dahil nagkaroon ng investigasyon, bakit nabaha po yung Pangasinan dahil nag-open ng 6 na gates yung pong San Roque Dam dahil mag-overflow na siya. At ang may control, dito po sa Manila nag-opisina. At yung may control, hindi pa po niya nakita yung San Roque Dam. Kaya gusto ko siyang balilin nun eh, buti. Bili po niya yun. Nandito po ako Senado, totoo lang po yun. Kindly, kung po yun lang, yung statement ko, pakitanggal. Andito po yun, nangyari po, ang dami po nga nagsisigari sa amin doon eh. Gano'n po nangyari, kaya po ng Yolanda. Nagpunto kami rin, tumulong po kami rin yung taon namin. Kaya yung Paskong yun po ng Yolanda, doon sa pinuntan po namin doon. Meron po silang Christmas carols eh, dahil nagdala kami ng generators mula sa Pangasinan. Pero as days goes by, at din taon na, hanggang dumating pa rin si Senator Lacson na, hanggang ngayon, 70% pa lang pala, di ba? Tapos nung unang ipinakita kung saan titira yung mga tao, maawa ka talaga, di ba? Mas maganda pa yung tirahan ng mga baboy kaysa dun sa ginawa po nila, di po ba? Pero mga ibig ko sabihin dito, kung gagawa po tayo ng batas, yung tuturanan na lang. Kaya sabi ko rito, sa komentaryo ni Senator Lacson kami, ay ni Senator Unasan, basta yung sabi natin, di ba? Magagaling po natin, mag-prepare tayo ng ano, mag-aaral po kami sa abroad, amin dito si Senator Lacson, Senator Unasan, si chairman natin, ang gagaling po ng Pilipino dyan. Pag gawin mo ng concept paper po, pinakamagaling ng Pinoy, di po ba? Pag gawin mo ng solusyon niya, pinakamagaling din ng Pinoy dyan. Ang gaganda ng wordings, gaganda. Yung application, marami po tayo, di po ba? Yun po ang kailangan po natin gawin. This is disaster. Yung rehabilitation po natin dito, pangalawang disaster po ang dumarating, di po ba? Yung takluban na lang, di ba? How do you call that? How many years now? Di po ba? Yung nangyari po sa Albay. Hindi po another disaster po yun, hindi makapasok kung may estudyante ng isang buwan. Samantalang ang tagal na po nilang hinihiling yun. Yun lang po ang mga point ko rito. Ano pa pag-uusapan natin, para yung mga gagawin po tayo amendments or whatever, gagawa tayo ng panibagong batas para magawa ng isang department, importante po rito masagot natin yung mga problemang yan. Ulitin ko po yun. Pag may disaster po nangyari sa atin, pagkatapos po ng rehabilitation po ng disaster pa rin. And I'm not kidding, I'm thinking of that too. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I notice none of you are having your lunch. Did you lose your appetite? Now, last few questions. Please, ASEC Purisima. No? So apparently we agree that historically, it's really more expensive when we go into damage control. Okay. Now, I'll take off from where the co-chair left off. No? Evacuation centers. There is a need for this. Okay. But maybe it has to be driven again by the data. Where do we put the evacuation centers? What should be the prototype design of the evacuation centers? Because when you're talking about evacuation centers, where there's a definition of insanity, no? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. Okay, so maybe ASEC Purisima, that's what you should also focus on. No? My last question basically is this. I don't know if anybody else. Itong interface natin with the peace process. Yung natural at man-made disasters, pareho kasi ang net effect eh. Destruction to lives, property, and occasionally liberty. Pareho, no? Iba lang ang pinanggalingan. So, do we have a mechanism that allows us to study and integrate this into our proactive systems?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you for the question. I would again relate this to our community-based DRRM program. Because this year, significantly, Your Honor, we're shifting to training the 14 basic sectors of society and the 14 vulnerable sectors of society as identified by NAPSI. No? So tuloy-tuloy na po yung ating pagbigay ng focus, yung proactive training sa kanila. Hindi lang po yung actual communities geographically, but sector-based training. So at matatamaan rin po natin yung peace process concerns dahil yung mga sectors ho na vulnerable, patuloy pa rin ho yung ating capacitation and empowerment initiatives pagdating dito. If I may also address yung evacuation centers, Your Honor, meron na po tayong mga prototypes. On the part of DPWH, ang ginagawa po nila is the regional level evacuation centers. Meron po dito, admittedly, even on the ground, syempre po, may political sensitivities rin ito dahil syempre po kung regional ito, nakabase ho ito sa isang munisipalidad. Syempre po kung pupunta doon yung mga ating mga evacuees from other municipalities would be an issue. Number two, kaya po ginagawa ng DILG yung more basic level evacuation centers, particularly at the city, municipality, and the barangay levels, yung mas maliliit ho na evacuation centers. I understand nakaprograma na po ito at budgeted na po ito. Itong initiative itong programa ito ng DILG. And lastly, Your Honor, on a related matter, gusto ko lamang pong i-address yung concerns about proactiveness. No? Gusto po natin maging proactive, but we can only be as proactive as the resources would allow. And what am I driving at, Your Honor, with all due respect? Our National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Fund is really insufficient to answer all these preparedness, prevention, mitigation, response, and rehabilitation concerns. To give you an idea, Your Honor, as legislated under the GAA this year, we only have 19.6 billion NDRM fund. Out of the 19.6, 10 billion is allotted for the rehabilitation and recovery of Marawi. That leaves us with 9.6 billion. Out of the 9.6 billion, 2 billion is allocated for the insurance of government buildings. That leaves us with the 7.6 billion National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Fund for the entire year, Your Honor. 7.6 billion. If you recall last year, Your Honor, we had around 15 billion NDRMF, 15 billion, na naubos ho by end of June last year. So actually, by July 1 last year, our NDRRM fund was already wiped out. That was 15 billion. Imagine this year kung saan po tayo makakarating with the 7.6. Of course, there is a replenishment system, and of course, DBM replenishes that, no problem, Your Honor. But down the line, as a more strategic solution, we may have to address this concern, Your Honor. Kasi po, magda-dovetail na po ito sa kung ano po yung kaya nating gawin at kung ano yung pinaprioritize. Kasi under the NDRMF po, kahit pwede naman po tayong magbigay ng national funds for the construction of evacuation centers, for example, or construction of disaster preparedness infrastructure, dahil po kulang yung pondo, ang nangyayari po, puro ho reconstruction ang nabibigyan natin. Kasi yun po ang priority, yung mga nasira. Hindi po natin mabigyan gaano, if at all, ng pondo, yung mga proactive infrastructures dahil limitado lang po yung pondo at napupunta po ito sa repair and rehabilitation ng mga nasirang infrastructure. Yun lamang po, Mr. Chair.
Sec Purisima, no? And I hope Sec Navarro and Ms. Val will listen. No? Itong evacuation center, we go back No, it must take the form of an advocacy, which at your level you must push. It is expensive when we're reduced to damage control. That's the strongest argument. Mas magastos. Pag hayaan nating mangyari, no, and then we react, not only in terms of funds. Now, I hate to inflict this on the Vice Chairman. No? Senator Lacson sa advocacy. Brave. Yeah? Budget reform, advocacy for village empowerment. Marawi, case in point. Diba? After Marawi, when it blew up, failure of intelligence now. No. Failure of local government. But there's a caveat. We must empower local government. Because the first question we ask, I'm just relating this as an analogy, no? Yusek Purisima. Paano nakaipon? I'm relating this to man-made, ng bala at baril nakagawa ng tunnel, di ba, na lagus-lagusan sa kalsada, no? Under the noses of local government. The answer was, we did not know. Oh no, the question is, why did you not report? The answer was, we did not know. That's the second question. Why did you not know? Pag-eleksyon, alam nyo lahat. So we must empower local government. That's our front line. Itong complementary dimensions ito, Isik Purisima, is yung infrastructure natin dapat complementary dun sa infrastructure development. Even from a national perspective, dun sa national security, sa security sector, there is no way we can catch up if we continue buying airplanes and ships and tanks. The direction, I think, and if you agree you must push for this, is information and communications technology. The technological revolution is moving faster than politicians and policymakers like us can understand and manage. Real time. Diba? Protecting what we have, protecting the transmission, and protecting the beneficiaries, the recipients, and our own interest. Information is neutral. That's what we factor into our entire system, not only of disaster risk reduction management, but for other purposes, for national development. Maybe if we can speak with one voice in this matter, I hope we can develop some traction. Okay, so, Neda, any comments?
Additional inputs po to ensure that we will be able to have resources for investments for disaster preparedness like evacuation centers and dredging of rivers. It's important to have an investment program and a tagging of DRRM for prospective projects, and then that will also be used, can be used as an input in projecting what the NDRIM fund, what the size of the NDRIM fund should be. And perhaps it's something that can be required under the law, DRRM tagging, preparation of investment programs. One example of how our investment programs can be prepared, or how we can inspire those on the ground to conceptualize what should go into the investment program. If we are to conduct differentiated disaster-related drills, what's the prominent disaster-related drill right now? It's earthquake. We always hold earthquake drills, and it's nationally prominent. But it's not nationally prominent, the holding of disaster-related drills na because of storm surges, tsunamis, mudslide, landslide. So I think it's time to mandate, have a whole of government approach to have to impose that as a mandate, to have a differentiated disaster-related drills, and then ask the communities to generate, to conceptualize what projects should be funded, because after a drill they will be able to identify that they don't have an evacuation center. They're so all they have are flatlands. They're so far from a feasible mound of land for an evacuation center. Then perhaps a smart engineer can identify an innovation like, have a mound of land and fortify that and ensure that it's easily accessible to the residents, and that can be used as an evacuation center. So those ideas can come out if we are to mandate differentiated disaster-related drills, Your Honors, I think.
Thank you, Yusek Navarro. Before we recognize Director Sandra Paredes, who wants to be recognized. Let me put this across, no? Maybe that's right up your alley, Yusek Nava. So I was observing, kanina, mag-uusap pa sana kayo ni Miss Balde. So pag nakabuelo ko pala, we're getting... Okay, no, I'm just kidding. Yes, the slogan of the current, build, 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 no? Again, this will be information-driven. Build what? Build where? Why? So, driven na naman ito. Then priorities. But we'll take care of that in the LEDAC, in GELAC if necessary. So, inputs lang ito para you can focus on the submissions you will make to your committee. Just my suggestion. We recognize Executive Director Sandra Paredes. Ma'am?
Magandang hapon na po, Mr. Chairman. Sa parte naman po ng mga probinsya, no, mga pamahalaang lokal, ang sa tingin po namin, Mr. Chairman, ang kulang po talaga yung capacitating talaga LGs. Kaya naman po ng mga LGs magresponde. Kaya lang po kulang po talaga yung local funds. Under the Local Government Code, which is also already amended by the NDRM, no, na under Section 21, yung 5% po ng amin, di ba? Tinatabi po yung 30% para talaga sa pag in case may calamity. And then kung walang calamity po, 5 years po, pag hindi po nagamit, nasa trust fund po siya. Pag hindi po nagamit, saka lang po nare-revert sa general fund para po mai-budget din ulit po ng sanggunian. Ang problema po, yung 5% na yan, based on the regular source of income or revenues, karamihan po ng ating LGUs, Mr. Chairman, maliit lang po yung kanilang locally generated revenues kumpara sa Metro Manila. Kaya po ang calamity fund o NDRM o local dream fund, L-Dream fund po ng mga LGUs sa Metro Manila, mas malaki po kaysa sa naitatabi po ng mga karamihan ng ating pamahalag lokal. Ito pong pag-access ng mga LGU sa NDRRM fund, on the average po, since the law was enacted, 2% lang po ang availment ng LGUs dyan. Based na rin yan doon sa study na ginawa, no? At last year lang po na-approve yung guidelines, yung NDRRM fund guidelines. So, yung processing time po na responde po ng OCD sa requests ng mga LGU for projects or yung mga evacuation centers, napakatagal po, mabilis na po yung 2 to 3 years. So, ganun, kaya po nakita niyo, naabot po ng iba-ibang administrasyon yung pag-responde kasi po napakatagal po ng pag-process. Ang dami pong requirements na hinihingi sa LGU, kukumpara sa requirements na hinihingi sa NGAs, mas kukunti. Pero bakit mas marami pong requirements? So, we brought this up already in the TWG discussions sa guidelines. Nakapag-submiti na po kami ng mga rekomendasyon namin. Foremost of that is the use of the insurance. Kasi po, dun sa, minsan po, disallow din ng COA yung paggamit ng 70% no, sa pre-disaster. At in bidding, no, may mga problema po kami dyan na dahil sa red tape, hindi makaresponde agad, no? Or sa pre-disaster pa lang. Sana po yung matulungan din ng NDRM fund, yung insurance po, ng 4 to 6 class na LGUs. Hindi po nila kasi kakayanin talaga yung sa insurance premium. Tsaka mas mamura po yung cost kung consolidated po yung insurance, mas nasi-share yung risk across and yung pong pansin po namin, yung sa, wala pa rin pong lumalabas na guidelines on the insurance. May sa 1 billion utilization dyan. So, ni-request po namin na sana nga kung wala po kaming re-receive na guidelines din on the insurance, nakapending pa po yan sa GSIS, ma'am, nung nag-last meeting po kami. At DOF po. So, ni-request po namin na mailabas na yung guidelines dyan para po, kung meron ng kalamidad, insured po yung mga LGUs natin. Hindi po masyadong mabigat yung gastusin. Katulad po sa Albay, ang chairman po ng LPP, si Governor Bichara. Ang mga reklamo po ng mga gobernador, may mga kalamidad sa mga areas nila. Ang tagal po bago dumating yung funds from the national. So, ang quick response, Kaya po kami sumusuporta na sa federalism Kasi para po yung pondo, kahit po anong agency ito yung council o department, basta po yung access po, sana po yung funds, may download na talaga po sa mga LGU diretso. Kasi sila naman po ang nakaharap dyan sa tao. Pag may kalamidad, sila po ang unang lalapitan ng tao. Sila po unang dumiresponde. So, yun po ang nagiging problema. At kung gusto naman po ng ibang probinsya, for example po sa Albay, gustong tumulong ng mga ibang probinsya, gagawa kami ng resolusyon para magpupul kami ng resources para pantulong po sa Albay. Hindi po inaalay ni COA yung ganun. Napakahirap po gumalaw kasi gustuhin man din ng ibang LGU ng tumulong, hindi dinidisallow po yun. Hindi po pwedeng gagamitin daw yung pondo para tumulong sa ibang LGU. That's one. And then ang request po din sana namin for transparency, magkaroon ng portal. Yung pag-request po namin ng mga projects sa pondo sa NDRM fund, sana may access sa mga LGU. Ano nang status ba ng pondo na request namin? Nasaan na? Hindi yung naghihintay, tapos hindi namin alam kung ma-approve na ba, nasa na bang level, pinagpapasapasahan kami, nasaan na yung status, hindi po namin malaman kung ano na nangyayari sa mga request kaya ng mga LGUs dyan sa NDRM fund na yan. So, yun po, Mr. Chairman, yung pong nasa hearing po ako nung nandun kayo, Senator, sa Bigger Pie, Bigger Slice, nabanggit nyo na bakit bibigyan pa ng mas maraming perang LGU, ang laki naman ng savings. Kung titignan po, unspent, yung unspent. Kung titignan po natin yung statement of receipts and expenditures po talaga ng mga LGUs, yung unspent fund po yung balance po. 46% nun po sa city, sila po ang may surplus. Hindi po mga probinsya. At yung Metro Manila, LGU, siya po ang may surplus. 39% po ang surplus kanila. So the rest po is, meron lang talaga kaming buffer para po 5 to 10%, 99% po na LGUs, ganyan. Kasi po, minsan ang DBM, yung January 15 era, nadidelay. So, walang pa sweldo. So, kailangan may buffer sila. Hindi sa sweldo na sila January 3rd. So, mga ganung problema. Pagdating naman po sa disaster, kung ano man po yung council o agency, ang gusto po talaga ng LGU, diretso na po talaga i-download yung pondo para po pagtayo na evacuation center. Kasi po, pag nag-allocate po ang isang LGU ng budget for infrastructure, dahil zero-sum game siya, hindi na, yung budget namin for social services, nakakain na siya ng infra. Yun po ang problema ng mga LGU. So, kaya po kami nakaasa din sa build. Yung aming CMGP fund or Kalsada fund, na-cut pa po by 52%. Nadali pa kami sa BICAM. So, ang hirap po ng gumalaw. Gusto namin magtayo ng infrastructure, pero, para i-shift yung demand, para dumami na yung mga negosyo sa probinsya at makatulong kasi yung taxes din po, hindi po kami din nakakakolekt dyan. But ang request po namin lang is more funds lang po talaga on disaster funds. Kung mag-allocate man ng GAA, kasi under the Constitution po, wala naman pong legal impediment kay Presidente na mag-allocate ng additional funds for LGUs. Kasi nakalagay po sa Constitution, LGU shall have a just share in the national taxes as determined by law. Hindi lang naman po GAA yung law. Ito po, marami pong paraan. Yun pong hindi po lang yung local government code pala ang determined by law. No? Yung pong GAA is also a law. So, executive action, yung nasabi nga po ni Joey Lina dati nung sa hearing, pwede na pong ma-download ni Presidente o mag-allocate ng funds, yung mga na-devolve na agencies para po for example lang po.
Ms. Paredes, actually, kaya naka-park na ngayon sa SPF yung NDRMF. Kasi yung SPF, ginagamit ng Presidente ito to augment the regular budget, hindi ba? So, yun ang reason kung ba't doon na nilagay ni Secretary Jokno yan eh. Dati, di ba nakalagay yan sa mismong OCD ba o sa NDRMC?
Yung,
or different agencies, di ba?
Yung Quick Response Fund.
Yeah,
po.
quick response. Pero sa ngayon, nandiyan na nakapark doon sa SPF. So, easily, the President can just, allocate to whatever agency or LGU na nangangailangan, di ba?
Tama po. For example lang po sa classroom, may request po sa DepEd. Sasabihin ng DepEd, pending pa yan sa approval ng NDRM. o ng OCD. So, ang tagal na po. At dati po, ang patakaran, yung po na yung po mga agencies, meron po silang quick response fund. Kaso po ngayon, wala na po sa mga department, nakasentra na po sa OCD. So, hindi rin po makaresponde yung ibang agencies.
The other aspect of capacity, no? Kasi pag nagsalita ng capacity, parang pondo kagad yun nasa isip natin, resources. There's another aspect, yung capacitating the individuals. Kasi marami sa mga local government units, although ang job description nila related sa disaster, wala silang kaalam-alam. So, ano yung programa ng OCD to capacitate individuals, especially in far-flung LGUs?
In terms of capacitation na activities, Your Honor, isa po yan yung community-based DRRM programs, at patuloy po naman dyan yung in coordination with the local government units, because OCD technically, Your Honors, is just until the regional level. Yun hong provincial down the line, hindi na ho yan plantilla ng OCD. So we really have to coordinate with the LGUs in terms of...
Kasi, hindi naman makakabuo ng comprehensive rehabilitation and recovery plan nang walang panggagalingan sa baba. So how many in the municipalities know how to prepare a, say, municipal rehabilitation and recovery plan, which will be the basis for a provincial, regional, and eventually yung comprehensive sa national? Kasi kung walang input, yung nanggagaling sa baba, because they have no knowledge, hindi naman sila capacitated, saan kukuhangin ng input o ng data yung regional to form part of the national?
Yes, Your Honor. Kasama po yan dun sa ating minomonitor, yung monitoring ng LDRIM plans, yung Local Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plans. Yun hong probinsya, minomonitor ho niya yung kanilang component municipal DRIM plans, no? At kasama na rin, and the regions are monitoring the provincial level DRIM plans. And then the national will look at the regional plans, no? And Your Honor, if I may just share, kasama rin na po ito doon sa ating kasama po dito yung ating recognition efforts. Kasama po yan doon sa ating tinatawag na Gawad Kalasag awards, na kung saan ang ating local government units ay nagpa-participate for recognition in their DRRM programs. Now, this is held annually, and kasama rin po ito sa DALG naman, yung Seal of Local Good Governance. Yes, Your Honor. So, nag-fuse na po itong efforts na ito, kasi kasama po dito yung information and capacitation, Your Honors.
How much of your resources is allocated to prevention and mitigation?
I would have to check in the budget.
Pero may budget yan, di ba?
May
Yung
budget
prevention
po.
and mitigation.
If I
as
may...
a thematic area.
Yes, yes,
How
Your
much of your resources total ang allocated for that?
I will check now, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, sorry, if I may just clarify, the QRF is now back sa agencies po. Wala na po dun sa SPF. Nasa agencies. Binalik
So sa
po
BICAM, binalik.
Binalik po. Nasa select agencies na po. Wala na po dun sa NDRIM fund. Hindi na po sa special purpose fund.
Kasi ang understanding ko, it's a separate item eh. NDRRMF, di ba?
Nakasite po siya under NDRMF, but naka-program sa line budgets ng
Mga
bawat
select agencies.
agencies.
Thank you.
Your Honor. Yusek Solidum, please.
Guidance lang po sa evacuation kasi nag-discuss sa evacuation kanina. We have to look at how we will put up evacuation centers depending on the type of natural hazard that the area is being impacted. For the case of Albay, it's really different because for an eruption of the volcano, the evacuation is very long. But for an area with no volcano, the evacuation can be very temporary refuge site, like schools. You don't need a very permanent evacuation sites. Yun lang po ang... So sa gymnasium po, yung United Architects of the Philippines and yung Accord Project, in the drill in Quezon City, they have set up parang bank, steel frame bank houses that can be placed inside gymnasium na meron ng separate higaan. So those innovative ways can be done. Kasi baka magkaroon ng Napakaraming evacuation na sinabi ni Congressman Espino kanina, hindi naman nagagamit because simply, these are like 1 day or 2 days lang. So, importante po sa guidance yon kasi baka magsisulputan ng evacuation sa lahat.
Thank you, Yusek Sugno. Yes.
Dagdag lang po ako kasi ang mga barangays po natin, for information lang po, yung barangays po natin, nakasama na rin po sa community-based monitoring system ng DILG, yung pagkuha po ng mga data para po sa pre-disaster. So, okay naman po yun.
Director Paredes, no? Nung nagsasalita kayo, parang ang nangyayari sa pag-iisip ko, no? I'm trying to look at this from a purely systems management point of view, no? Yung presidente, you mentioned risk. The risk is actually reduced to ground level. The president takes a risk. He's the ultimate risk taker. Sa akin, no? I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying na yung intervening self-inflicted bureaucracies between the president and the LGUs is, I think, where the bottleneck is. Kahit na gusto niya mag-download, itong rule na to natutunan ko sa Philippine National Police. Kung gustong gawin, may paraan. Kung ayaw gawin, may dahilan. So maybe collectively, that should be also ASEC Purisima, no? The challenge for us. Dahan-dahanin lang natin ito because we don't want to be just to be another ad hoc initiative, no? We institutionalize this para we can factor in this intervening layer where the risk is not present or minimally present. Katulad ng sinabi ko kay Yusek Solidum, no? Kaya siguro kampante yung layers where studies are made, policies are initiated is because they do not share the risk. Okay. That's one thing we can, it cuts across the policy landscape from funds to implementation to data management, in fact to everything. So please consider that, no? And then lastly, this is a perennial question we ask, no? Can you, ASEC Purisima, submit to this committee the other peripheral laws, issuances, EOs that impact on the proposed amendments?
We will do that, Your Honor.
Para we can do this comprehensively. Okay?
We'll do that, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman? Any other comments? Did you all have your...
Under the present setup, yung council type system, ano ba yung anong dynamics ito between and among the agencies concerned? Ano yung mga nakita nyong benefits or advantages versus disadvantages? Yung vertical, horizontal coordination? Sige nga.
Your Honor, in terms of coordination, maganda po yung coordination namin ngayon at the NDRMC level, particularly at the response cluster level, kapag meron na ho talagang disaster or calamity, I should say, pag-responde natin, mas mabilis na ho ngayon. In fact, and of course, this is the response cluster is headed by DSWD. In fact, if only to highlight, Your Honor, nung Typhoon Nina, that was end of 2016, Christmas 2016, pagkalampas na sa Bicol po ang tinamaan nung Nina, pagkalampas po ng Nina sa Catanduanes at nandun na po talaga siya sa mainland, nakapagpalipad na po agad tayo ng C-130 to Virac 2 hours after the typhoon left Catanduanes. So we're now quick in that nakaka-responde na po tayo ng ganong kabilis. Hindi na po tayo nag-aantay ng araw.
Siguro magandang lesson yung Yolanda, no? As mentioned by Yusek Solidum, yung threat factor, di ba? Kasi nakatanim sa kanila, mamamatay tayo rito, mauubos ang bahay natin dito. So, they're now more parang may preparedness syndrome.
Yes, Your Honor. And in fact, also, in another case, the earthquake in Surigao this time last year, Your Honor, initial media reports relayed that people, nung pagkatapos ho lumindol, people instinctively went to higher ground. So, unti-unti ho, we're reaping the benefits of our information and advocacy campaign. So, pinagpapatuloy ho natin to. Nagsisimula na po.
So
Mas
we'll
nagiging-
advise Yusek Solidum na takutin pa lalo yung mga...
I agree, Your Honor.
Yeah.
In behalf of the Department of Science and Technology, we see this Republic Act 10121 is very helpful, but this needs to be upgraded because there are many information now available that needs to be translated into risk information and continued into action at the local level. In the Department of Science and Technology, the current Secretary de la Peña, thought that we need to really be more proactive about it. So that he asked me if I can be coterminous undersecretary. So inaccept ko naman, double job. But because of this, we now have a harmonized research and development agenda. And this will be continued to be funded and to be given not only to agencies but to state universities and colleges. So I'd like to share that we hope that the SUCs at your provinces will be now the intermediary between us, or actually the guide for better risk assessment. And so we're doing that, and we hope that this need to be continued. Pagdating po doon sa research and development agenda po ng DOST, maraming component, let me just summarize po, is observation and monitoring networks. We will produce new instrumentation both at the ground, and then we will have the satellite. We will do risk communication. We need social scientists here. Then we are developing technologies and solutions for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk management. And we treat climate change as one of the drivers of risk. We don't separate climate change as a distinct issue, but one of the drivers of risk. I think if we are able to merge these two issues, climate change and disaster risk, at the ground level, pare-pareho lang naman po yan, maapektuhan yung mga tao. So if in the new law, we can incorporate these two things by looking at climate change as one of the drivers of risk and treat climate change as a developmental issue para seamless across the new department kung meron man po. Thank you.
Na mga bagong science-based information na hindi available before, hindi ba? So pwedeng ma-incorporate talaga sa ano. Baka pwedeng pakiulit yung commercial Yusek, yung application, ano na nga yun?
Fault Finder.
Fault Finder.
FIVOX Fault Finder. Ay nagbiro po kayo
FIVOX
Fault Finder. Sabi nyo, hindi lang sa Senate yung fault finding. Last time na nag-hearing tayo. So, kung gusto niyo po malaman lahat ng faults, and we will develop po, Senator, a new application. I will call it the Hazard Hunter. When you tap the cell phone, all the hazards will appear. Kung magawa po natin yan sa country, mas still being developed. Direct na po yun sa family and law level.
Yusek Saludum, are the scientists you are talking about still in the Philippines? Yung mga sinasabi niyong think tank, the technical...
Dito po, within the Philippines lang po yan.
No, what I mean is, I'm talking of people.
People.
Young people, especially.
Yeah, we're in the Philippines, but we also have this strategy in DOST that we want to develop the Philippines as a science and technology innovation hub globally. Why? Because we are not only victims of disasters, but we have learned many things from it. We can share, but we can also invite researchers to work with us. Dagdag na empleyado po natin yung mga researcher. At nadami pa yung knowledge na makukuha for the benefit of the community. So yun po yung strategy ngayon ng DOST po.
Yung fault finder, ayun yung i-delete natin yun, yung sinabi mo kanina about...
Ay, di-delete po natin yung joke.
Yung sa-
Sorry po Sorry. Hindi ko alam yung protocol. Delete po, delete
We
po.
want you to work without any distraction.
Without any implication.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman? First, we want to thank the resource persons. I think we benefited from quality, weren't quality, although, by the way, the non-attendance of the resource persons we invited does not end here. No? The Oversight Committee will meet in executive session to decide whether those who did not attend will be classified as man-made disasters. So, Mr. Chairman, any other matters? The part of the Senate, this meeting is adjourned.
On the part of the House, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.